Hi, Emily. How are you?
Finished, but let's touch base. Whenever you come down. Other than the CNC.
Then we're gonna need much higher.
Got that section right there.
Sorry, I thought. And then go back and see if we can put $5,000 in paving.
Yeah,
Oh, shoot, I could just go to my
yeah.
office.
And that's just the wallpaper and full office.
Angela, did you get my email?
Yes, I do.
PowerPoint? Okay, thank you.
You just tell me when to put your slide.
Perfect. That's fine.
We're good.
Yeah. I was told that it's nice email traffic.
Force Center's cool. You mean like the
I
tech?
get like 3 emails a day, and half of them are asking me to retire or resign. You know?
You gotta be kidding me.
Yeah. Pretty hilarious. But nobody, so I got stuff.
So,
Yeah. Yep. They were like, not even chatting on our collaboration calls.
All right, well, welcome to the Great Salt Lake Technical Team meeting. I'm sorry about this small room. Apparently the Core Center and Soldier Hollow were booked. So we're squeezing all together, get comfortable. It's intimate and intense discussion. That's what we'll have today. Thank you all for coming. Can we do a quick round of introductions? Your name, who you're with, and that'll kick us off. Emily, do you want to start with us?
Sure. My name is Emily Holly. I'm the division planner for Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. Jamie Barnes, director, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Ben Steierman. Oh, excuse me.
Oh,
Sorry,
wow.
Tim.
Don't mind me.
I just am so used to sitting next to Jamie that I was on autopilot there.
He's trying to overrule.
Wow, at least you're really red.
He's the left-hand man.
I don't embarrass you.
Totally putting that down in my memory.
Ben Steierman, deputy director at Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
I'm Jake Alexander, Minerals Operations Manager for Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Scott Hynek, USGS, Utah Water Science Center.
Andrew Rupke, Utah Geological Survey.
Elliot Jagnecki, Utah Geological Survey.
Wayne Wirtzbaugh, Utah State University.
Angela Gong, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Jennifer Biggs, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Kim Colburn, Utah Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining.
Brian Brew, Utah Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining.
Georgie Corkery, Great Salt Lake Institute, Westminster University.
Craig Miller, Utah Division of Water Resources.
Aspen Johnson, Office of Great Salt Lake Commissioner.
Laura Vernon, Water Resources.
Rob Baskin, Institutional Memory, USGS retired.
Nice. Lucky.
Al DeMars, Water for the West.
John Creer with Water for the West as well.
Chelsea Cameron with Gilmore Sanctuary.
Zach Higgins with Gilmore Sanctuary.
Claire Keller with Utah Geological Survey.
Steve Biddle, off the UGS.
Christine Rumsey, U.S. Geological Survey.
Bill Brown, Great Salt Lake Ranch Cooperatives.
Oh, Linda Freitas, Friends of Great Salt Lake.
Thank you all for being here. This is my first time driving the boat, so if I start to go off course, online folks, it's kind of hard to introduce people, but so I just read off names. We got Connor Simon, Arla Wing, Emily Hamill, Heather Dove. I'm sorry if I'm saying people's names wrong. Jim Harris, Jason Gibson, Joe Havasey, John Luff, John Ray, Karen Kettenring, Leanna Littler-Wolf, Leila Amadi, Lisa Welsh, Matt again, Marissa Weinberg, Rob Dubuque, Steve Morey, Tyler McIntosh, Xiaoban Jiang, and is that the end of the list? Okay, great. Thank you all. Thank you. Couple of updates for the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council. They are kicking off their looking at fiscal year 2026 projects to support a little bit. We're trying to move it a little bit earlier, so they are starting to think about that as well. So that's kind of nice to dovetail with this process in the tech team as we look at hot topics. And one thing they've done in the past is hot topics that don't get picked up by the tech team. Sometimes it's of interest to them to fund things. So that's an update there. Great Salt Lake Salinity Advisory. You want to take this one?
The main update with the Salinity Advisory Committee is that we haven't touched the berm, just still open and flowing to the north, and that we are concluding a engineering analysis with Jacobs Engineering to have kind of I suppose a 30% design and cost estimate on what it might look like to do something that's more adaptable to manage and can meet the goals that we have for the berm and being able to move salt bidirectionally as well as control water flows. So we're hoping to have that well before this meeting meets next, but more info to come on that in the Salinity Committee.
What is the salinity out there now?
I believe we were 120 last time, around 120. It hasn't changed much. Yeah.
Answered.
Is that right? So it hasn't changed much with it being open.
Great. And then for tech team, we've got two things on our agenda for today. We've got Scott telling us about lithium sources and inflows in Great Salt Lake, which we're really looking forward to. And then we've got some time on the agenda to look at the draft hot topics for this fiscal year, so that we can make sure that we are filling in the gaps that we need to understand to manage the lake better. And so we've devoted some healthy time for that later today. Any other updates? Let's go ahead and kick off with Scott. Let's see here.
Okay, I'll go from right here, Angela.
Figure out how to. Hey. Okay, great. There we go.
Okay, so Marissa and Ben had asked me to talk about some of what we learned from a hot topics kind of some resources associated with that we undertook a few years ago. What I'm going to show you is how that nestles into regional work that we're doing. So we've had sort of long-term support from Mineral Resources Program, and also all of our network of monitoring and hydrologic technicians is sort of like the critical piece of how this all gets in context. So, all right, let's see the next one, Angela. And I'm gonna try to just, be respectful of your time and make a couple, I think, important points. But I want to start here with, if you mine lithium as a resource out of a fluid, right? Essentially what happens is lithium doesn't evaporate and water does. So it becomes concentrated. Natural process, right? And Great Salt Lake is a closed basin. So that's how the lithium becomes enriched in the terminal sort of fluid. Okay, Angela. All right, so this is what a lithium mine looks like, right? And this is where, by mining this stuff, you're just accelerating these natural processes where the water and the salt budget basically decouple and you concentrate salt. So if you go, Angela, to the next one, there's a simple sort of notion of how that would work, right? You make a solid, you lose the water to vapor, and what's left, the lithium stays in that solution. So these are economically and energetically advantageous ways to mine lithium. So that's in general what the interest might be. Okay, next one, please. So, and people have probably seen this plot in the lower right before, some version of it. And all I want to say, and that's just asking the question, what's dissolved in the South Armor Great Salt Lake? And that's the total salt mass you're seeing there. And the point here is, if you have a concentration and a volume, then you get a total mass. And so that's how we get this load. So one of the things that we'll do is say how much lithium is in there, and you just multiplying a volume by a concentration, and that gives you a mass. Okay, next one, please. And then the other question is, well, how fast is lithium coming into that lake, right? So here you need to add a volume and a concentration again, but you need time, right? You need a rate. So the discharge there in cubic feet per second on the x-axis. So to the right is higher flows. And then you need a concentration, which is like lithium in micrograms per liter. So this is the type of data that you would use to say this amount of mass is going into that lake every year. How quickly is this lake basically being replenished? And so in the interest of being very conservative about that, you know, coming up with some sort of time frame over which that happens, we began by sort of looking at a specific part of the annual hydrograph, the water year, which we thought would be representative of base flow, essentially. So that's the next slide, please, Angela. So what is base flow? These are the gauges, mean daily discharge, starting at the water year. So October 1 is 0, right? And then you see spring runoff kind of centered over day 200. We don't have enough information to kind of, at this point, account for the complexities of the relationship between concentration and discharge, essentially. So what you do is you pick a stable period of flow so you can compare between watersheds. So if you do the next one, Angela, this is the idea that somewhere in this 1/3 portion of the year, most of your stable flows are always there. They're generated largely by groundwater input to the streams or surface water. And that component of the flow is there during spring runoff and during other periods of time too. So, you know, in terms of an annual mean, that would be a low estimate, but those would be the types of values you'd want to use. Also, by controlling for hydrologic condition, you can compare watershed to watershed.
Sorry to interrupt. If you are the owner of the blue Honda Element, you left your lights on. Anybody? Nope. All right.
Thank you. Okay. All right, Angela, I think we can. So, you know, one way to do this, and you can sort of see here, when we want to take those, then you have to choose a concentration, right? Or a value to multiply by your discharge. And so this is just an example of some different filters that could be used to actually characterize the lithium flux, you know, in a given place. So I'll have next one, please, Angela. So if we do this, for example, I'll just get right to the chase. This is the sort of sketches of a lithium budget for Great Salt Lake. So if you take the Bear River at Corinne, we have 56 instances where we can multiply concentration times discharge. And you can see there the mean load or flux of lithium is about 400 kilograms a day. So a little bit less than half a metric ton. An annual flux, that would be 150 metric tons per year. And if we apply our first base flow filter, we get down to only 14 samples included in that. You get a nearly identical value, slightly higher. Standard deviation goes way down. So then that's a conservative estimate. And then there's some key uncertainties under there that really limit our ability to make a robust budget. And then below that, you will see the estimate of how much lithium is actually sitting in the lake. And this is based on Andrew's work, which I don't know if it's public yet or not.
It just published a couple weeks ago.
Okay. So, and what I did is I took his like 2020 to present estimates, made an average, included one of his calculations of Joe's number from Compass's estimate, and came up with that sort of resource, or that lithium standing there. And then, of course, if you divide that resource by the inflow, you get, there's a few ways to think about that. You could get the mean residence time of lithium in the lake. You could get the sort of time to replenish or grow that resource. So there's a few ways to think about that. But and then I'm going to walk you now from here. That's sort of a punchline. Now from here, I'm going to walk you back through some notions of why we believe that estimate's really conservative and it's significantly less than 2,700 years. And the first point with the 2,700 years I think would be of value is that's not like Bonneville lithium. Okay. All right. That would be 10,000 years or something beyond that. So we're now really talking about Great Salt Lake itself, and not some distillation process that took tens of thousands of years. And I will also say I've done similar calculations for some of the biggest lithium brine deposits in the world, and those numbers are often millions of years, not thousands of years. So this is a very active and dynamic resource in that regard, unlike some of the other closed basins that are really high in lithium concentration. So, and then I say, you know, we can refine this. So I'm just going to walk you through a few more pieces of data. So if you go to the next slide, Angela. Right, okay, and this is just an anecdotal thing. This has been public. Some people have seen this. We've been doing a little bit of work in the lower Bear, and you can see there those green dots. Those are significant lithium sources that we've identified that are ungauged, you know, and then there's all kinds of other things going on in there. But what I want to highlight, if you do one more, Angela, from the Corinne gauge, which is the value I was just using, to the Bear River Bay outflow, you know, work that Christine has done on the salt balance for that reach or for the lake, and work that we've done looking at instantaneous flows indicate that the TDS at that lower gauge is 5 to 10 times what it is at Corinne. So that would essentially mean, you know, that influx could go up an order of magnitude easily. And this is only one watershed feeding the lake, right? Which is another reason why this is a very conservative estimate. Nothing to do with the Weber, the Jordan, or any of the big groundwater systems are included in that number at all. So, you know, that's why I think we can keep stepping way below 2,700 years in terms of a, you know, a time frame for this. All right, next one, please.
Are the green dots springs?
Yeah, or streams that originate at springs, you know, 30 miles down or something. But yeah, it's all groundwater stuff. Yeah.
How much of that 5 to 10x increase could be due to leakage from the salt ponds in Bear River Bay?
Absolutely no idea.
So the ponds in Bear River Bay, Wayne, are downgrading, hydraulically downgrading by miles.
Explain what that means. You're lower.
The area illustrated is hydraulically upgrading in the basin. Disconnected from this area.
So right from the north, it's the catchment of where all the lithium is being concentrated prior to the ponds.
Okay, the measurement of the 5 to 10x is above the north of the ponds.
Hydraulically upgrading of the ponds, yes. And the ponds, Wayne, have been sealed, so they're no longer a significant source of sort of salt flowing back into, back into the bay.
Okay.
And there's no shortage of sources of salt in Bear River Bay, so I think any one source is probably unlikely. It's it's a big, complicated place. Okay, Angela, so maybe the next one. So now here again is if you look at concentration and discharge, and what you're going to see there you'll see the Bear River at Corinne is the small orange dots. And so as discharge moves up to the right, concentration goes down. This is because of dilution. But if you were diluting with pure water and no lithium was associated with those additional flows, you know, and the blue, same thing, this down to the right slope, those would be significantly steeper if we were just diluting. And your load wouldn't change, right? If you just added pure water, you know, the discharge would go way up, but the load wouldn't change because the concentration would be going down. And then what you see there on the upper right, the bigger orange fuzzier dots, that's the Bear River Bay outflow. And that's what we see there. And then the other thing that I think is critical to understand is that gray bullseye in the center, that's the Jordan River at 1700 South. And so basically, there are several hundred data points behind that, right? And this is the top. Okay, great. So let's look at the next one, Angela. All right, and so then if you look at these black dots now that I put on there, those are other individual sites, other stream gauges or springs or streams where we made measurements in the Great Salt Lake Basin, in the whole basin. So that's the sort of variation you would see in concentration and discharge. And if you see clusters, that's a site. So, and these are just the base flow estimates. So ideally what you do is each one of those sites turns into a tight little cluster with some uncertainty. And then you can use that to map spatial variation. And you can also use it to identify point sources. So if you look in the far upper left there, the two black dots, that's the same site. And that's Crystal Hot Spring, which turns into Salt Creek, which goes into the Bear River just above Corinne, right where Malad goes in. And that's a point source. You can say, okay, this is a huge amount of lithium's coming from this specific place, and you can map it out. So, okay, let's look at the next one. And then this is just in general, you know, as you move up and to the right, you know, you're basically, your discharge and your concentration go up together. They scale as a function of watershed size. So as you increase your watershed area, they're both increasing, and therefore your load's increasing. And then if you look to the right on this, for example, you're just moving away from this base flow, this stable flow condition into higher flow regimes. Okay, next one, please, Angela. And then I'm going to show you one more reason why I think these estimates, you know, of influx are conservative. And this is also the temporal variation in lithium. So this is the same thing you've seen, concentration versus discharge. Okay, Angela, let's look at the next one. Okay, so what I did there is I added the Weber River at Gateway, which is right on I-84, right in the canyon, below the Morgan Valley. Really long period of record, and we have, I'll show you the data in a second. And it's notably different than the Weber at Plain City, which is the other blue thing. And this is just one of the things I think that I'll highlight here as we wrap up. Next one, please. So, you know, again, the question, what is base flow? Here's Plain City and Gateway, right? And again, the day of the water year, and this is the mean annual hydrograph. Important to note, Gateway has more than a 100-year record. So these are kind of really robust things, and Plain City is quite long. And you can, for example, see from day 300 to 365, Gateway's on this long, slow decline. You know, that's got to be sort of, there's at least 3 reservoirs upstream, and that's sort of management there. In Plain City, at the same time, you see, you know, diversions are shutting down, return flows are coming back in, your discharge is climbing back up there, and then they swap over. But one of the things I want to do is compare the Plain City and the Gateway base flow loads in lithium on the next one, which would be the left side of that graph. Anyway, can you go forward, Angela? So this is we had an auto sampler at this gateway site. And so what we have here is sub-daily at times for more than a year, samples of lithium load coming down the Weber River there. And what you see, this was spring runoff of 23, so this is a massive year. The type of thing that would be really hard to account for appropriately in any inflow flux estimation. And it just turned out that we were able to have an auto sampler there and sample all this. And what you see is the base flow stuff, the stuff on the very far right-hand side is what would fit in our base flow definition. You're looking at 5 kilograms a day. And at the peak of runoff, you got all kinds of stuff over 50 kilograms a day. So, you know, your flux goes up in order of magnitude during runoff in a site like this. And this is generally a low lithium concentration site. So we know that, you know, those base flow estimates are also conservative because the big flows bring a lot of lithium. Okay, next one, Angela. And here I'm just going to show you a couple scraps of data from that series to you know, illustrate the potential and the complications from using this to also track hydrologic processes. And what you're seeing here is a lithium to sodium mass ratio times 1,000. And if you look to the right in particular, you know, I think we're sampling every third day then. You see these clusters with these slopes in them. Those are just different waters. That's water management or some shift in the hydrologic regime. And you get a water with its own fingerprint of distinct lithium to sodium ratio. And that's real data. And you could characterize sources and use things like this to track water in the system. Next one, Angela. And then this is, people always ask, well, couldn't you do some sort of proxy measurement, deploy some sort of instrumentation and measure the flux, you know, based on, say, for example, specific conductance, which works really well for total salt. The problem is lithium's a very small component of the total mass. And what you see here is there's at least 2 slopes, right? And those are 2 different water types with 2 different specific conductance to lithium ratios that are both, you know, 2 different relationships in the same river. Okay, next one, please.
What
Angela.
river is that?
That's Weber, right at Gateway. Okay, so now if you just look back again at this, you see the Jordan River, and you go straight down from that cluster, and you've got the Weber at Plain City, the lower elevation stuff. And then you go straight down from there, and you've got the Weber at Gateway, sort of higher, more dilute. And if you look just say at 100 CFS and you compare that difference there, at Plain City, the concentration goes up, you know, from, you know, close to 100, right? Not quite an order of magnitude, but say a factor of 5. And so what happens between Gateway and Plain City, right? There could be more return flow, could be anthropogenic sources, wastewater, pharmaceutical stuff. Ogden River could have something that's unaccounted for. And then there's older groundwater. Once you're at the margins of this basin, when you're actually out of that canyon and you're actually in the basin, there's fault controlled, warm, salty groundwater at the margins of all these mountain blocks. And those systems are impinging on the streams. And that lithium is being carried to the lake. And a lot of it's thermally driven and it's extremely complicated hydrology, but it's probably a significant source. Okay, and then I think the next slide is the last one, Angela. So all of this data, which was basically about 700 new lithium concentrations in the Great Salt Lake Basin, paired with discharge measurements, fits into this data release. We've been working on a lithium database in the Great Basin for 5 or 6 years now with the Mineral Resources Program, which has about 20,000 entries. So what this has allowed us to do is kind of put this really detailed 700 from the Great Salt Lake Basin into a regional context, and allowed us to begin to ask some of these questions. So all of that data that you know, once the discharge values are really verified, the concentrations are good, then it'll be available in this data release. And of course we can make it available, and most of it's already on the internet. I would say another thing that we know is the breaches, and the North Arm and Bear River Bay and Farmington Bay are really important buffers on this system, and huge amounts of mass move around in those systems. And then, of course, intra-lake cycling, which is something Andrew and Elliot sitting here to my left have done a good bit of work on. So yeah, that's I guess what I've got to share today.
I have a question. So when you're talking about sourcing from different places like groundwater, fault control systems, older groundwater, has there been any, or is there any value you think to doing like a hydrogen isotope study to kind of identify maybe the seasonality if it is related to release of reservoirs or agricultural runoff?
I mean, there are all kinds of things you could do that would be simple, right? I mean, yeah, I've thought about that. It'd be really interesting. I mean, Weaver River Conservancy, they'll tell you from Echo to Gateway is about 18 hours, right? And you can watch their gauge and stuff, but I mean, each of those reservoirs is unique enough in some way geochemically that you can mix them and unmix them at Weaver, at Gateway, and just say, okay, yeah, this is what's happening. And yes, everything, Yeah, no, I think that stuff has all kinds of potential. Yeah. Wait.
From a management perspective, your estimate is 2,700 year residence time, but a lot less. But
yep.
I don't know what a lot means in this case, but probably regardless, we're looking at mining, not replenishment of lithium as a resource. Was that a bottom?
So that's exactly the question. Because I hear people say sustainable mining. It's an oxymoron. I think this is the heart of the matter, and I would say easily, I'm confident that we can beat that sort of regeneration time or mean residence time down into hundreds of years from thousands. And I'm also pretty confident that if you will have a 40-year life of mine that you want, right, that could be fast enough regeneration that there might be an additional year or two of extra operation, right? That would be made up for with inflows over something like a 40-year life of mine. So I think, it's possible, I think, to include the replenishment rate in those types of calculations, and it might add a little bit of resource.
Joe, go ahead.
Scott, it was recognized in Andrew's paper a couple weeks old, and I identified it as well, that really lithium mass load in both arms has been stable, since the 90s, notwithstanding the fact that it is kind of de facto extracted by removal of magnesium. So lithium goes along for the ride when magnesium is extracted and sold to the marketplace. So notwithstanding that, significant, tonnage per year going out of the lake, it is interesting that the lithium mass load has been stable over that period.
Yeah, I agree, Joe, and I really had a lot of fun reading Andrew's paper. I think that really points to the interlake cycling too. If we're at a lower lake level, all of that stuff that's hung up high and dry is slowly reworking back in different ways. So I think it's like a lake level low kind of driven thing would be one good answer. But yeah, it's quite a bit of stuff out there.
One other interesting thing about Andrew's study as well is that, everything that we pumped out of the lake in the 80s and how everything is migrating, back potentially, and how that connection exists and what we lost during that time. I mean, I think there's still a lot to learn about, how that cycles in the lake.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what we've been finding out is the sediment on the playas are elevated in lithium. So it's been sequestered in the clays. Even the oods have a lot of lithium in it. And so it's going to mix with the groundwater. And some of the groundwater is concentrated over long periods of time, and that's just going to leach back into the lake over a slow period. But we don't know what that time is. So there's that sequestration from what you're showing sitting on the lake bed. And then over time, that's leaching back into the lake.
I've raised this point before, not with respect to lithium, but you do have lithium leaving the lake via aerosols and via dust. And I think that needs to be taken into account both for the overall salt budget for sodium and chlorides flying out. And so that would help the overall budget if we get some handle on.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, some of the dust studies that we had done, spatially, we had things close to the lake and not close to the lake. And we really saw very little like sea spray type aerosol dust signature at all, unless you were like within meters of the lake. And I don't know if they weren't capturing it appropriately or not. But I think it's a value you could come up with.
There's the report from Kevin Perry that's, you know, his dust study, and he's got lithium concentrations from all around the lake. And it matches with the data that we're collecting, that you're around 70 to, in some cases, up to 400 ppm.
Scott and Andrew, the hypothesis that it's coming from groundwater, I think that's really interesting. I think the study that was just referenced found elevated concentrations of lithium kind of in that grid sampling effort, mainly on the west side, pretty close to normal faulting, which is interesting. And then you know, we do have 2 wells, rather, you know, deep wells and, you know, in sediment still, you know, that have warm water, and you do see, you know, elevated concentrations of lithium, not economic, but, you know, interesting concentrations, you know, 70 micrograms per liter, ballpark, which definitely could be a source, especially if that were near normal faulting.
Yeah, Joe, you know, on the east side of the promontory mountains, there was the Bunts thesis that Elliot helped out with, and then we've been out there too. And there is a north-south gradient, and there's a core of that spring discharge where you get warm, salty water that's high in lithium concentration, and you get Bonneville chub living in those springs. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of this old, stable discharge. And yeah, I think there's a number of those systems out there for sure.
There's a lot of tectonic activity up there too. A lot of minor earthquakes, very deep.
Any other question? Oh yeah. Go ahead.
So this is down the road way, a little sidetrack question, but I don't know how lithium is mined. Can somebody explain how it's being mined? Are the playas being protected for dust reasons, for habitat reasons in some areas? How are they extracting it?
I mean, so at the lake, they're currently not extracting it, but what?
Oh, so if they
Yeah, if they were, so I mean, like in US Magnesium's case, they were kind of stockpiling lithium from their production of magnesium metal, and so they were working off a stockpile. Currently, there's a company called Waterleaf that is looking at sort of a direct lithium extraction process where they're cycling a bunch of lake water, but they're just doing a pilot study right now. So it would really either be through as a byproduct of existing extraction through evaporation ponds, or it would be through one of these direct lithium extraction operations, cycling a bunch of water. In theory, returning it most of the water back to the lake.
And Heidi, just to also add on to what he said, the Waterleaf operation, there's been a whole lot of legislation and laws that have been put in place to allow for like what we've determined as like a feasibility operation. So they have to demonstrate how they use their water, how it might impact the life around the lake and the ecosystem. So they can't just go in and like get a royalty agreement. They need to come in and demonstrate that it's not going to harm the lake. And so that's ongoing right now. Waterleaf is the first enter into one of these feasibility assessments. So we're looking forward to collecting the data and working with others that are, have knowledge of the sphere to determine if there could be or are any negative impacts.
And, you know, in a broader sense, it's worth keeping in mind that all of these two methods that Andy described get you to a solution that's about 7% lithium by weight, at which time it goes into a plant to be refined into other types of metals for other uses. And that there are also rocks that can be mined for lithium. And they typically, those mines can be turned on and off more quickly, but they're more expensive to operate. And they're also energetically more expensive, a lot of fossil fuels for that versus this. So those are a more dynamic supply of lithium.
Hey, maybe just a suggestion. I saw Steve Moray was online and he's with Waterleaf. Maybe not to put Steve on the spot, but perhaps when their feasibility assessment concludes, we could have him back to present the results of their findings to the tech team. I think it'd be a great place to brainstorm and talk through some of those. Steve, are you on? And do you think that's something you would y'all would be willing to come present on?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Appreciate the dialogue, and yes, we'd be happy to sit and discuss what we've learned as we go through this pilot process. We do see that we can extract lithium from the lake water and return the lake water minus the lithium. So happy to share those results and move this forward as we continue on in this permitting and move towards a production facility. So thank you for that offer. We'll take you up on it.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'll definitely make sure to make room on the agenda to have you all. And we did do a site visit out there on Friday. A lot of the folks in this room joined from DNR and water quality. And I just, accolades to Waterleaf. They did have a really clean operation. It was very well put together, and they did a really good job explaining the process. So we're excited to see the results and see what the actual chemistry looks like coming out of the end of the pipe. Yeah.
Any other questions for Scott or comments? Great, thank you so much.
Yep, I appreciate it. Absolutely.
Okay, this next bit, we've got these draft hot topics, and go ahead and grab one, pass by. I'm 1 or 2 copies short. Robust crew today. Pull those up.
Oh, you don't need to pass them.
Who, me? Hey, you know what? You better stop talking like that. I'm gonna keep this.
Stable flow on the east side of Common.
Okay, so I know it's a little small.
It's deeper. Yeah, I think it's coming up on some sort of fall or something. Yeah, I think so. It also looks like a carbonate aquifer. Okay. So it kind of could be a really long distance.
I've lost my data.
Things, yeah. And just, the temp could almost be geothermal gradient, right? It's like 28 C or something. So it's like.
What were your going? Sorry, go ahead.
Angela, while you're getting that pulled up, do you mind if I give a little overview? So while Angela's enlarging the screen here so everybody can read this, and hopefully some of you have some paper copies as well. The idea here is that we do these hot topic grants every year, and we're really looking to fill management gaps on the lake. So the idea is that we love novel research, but how does it apply to our management? And so we've really tried to focus in on specific questions related to how Forestry manages Great Salt Lake, and also how our partners manage Great Salt Lake. So this list here is a compilation of questions and kind of buckets, I guess, that we've received from our partners, researchers, people who think that these would be valuable research questions. So we tried to capture everything in these different buckets, and I think what we're trying to do today is to get you all to, take a look at these. We know everybody's time is limited, so we thought this would be a good discussion to have, and maybe even prioritize these a little bit. I mean, really what we're looking for is, do we need to take any of these buckets off the list and focus in on anything? Is there anything that's just you all feel is absolutely, immediate in nature that we really need answers for to be able to better manage? And then are there things that, that could possibly wait? And again, one of the things that we've kind of looked at as well is how much we offer in a given year, right? Like we want to understand if the $125,000 cap has been enough to facilitate the research, or if folks feel like that's something that we need to increase the cap on to get some different, more meaningful research in different ways. So we don't want that to be the limitation of supplemental research and answering questions. Also, we've explored the idea of multi-year research. I think that's always been a challenge, is to do this in February or January or whatever month we do it in, and then award the money that's available July, and then you have to have your research done in that time frame. So we've kind of been playing around with the idea of perhaps looking at doing a multi-year research effort to allow for some of those more difficult questions to be answered. Obviously, that would be at the based off of the ability to continue to get that funding. That the legislature decided not to fund this, we would have to have some safety nets built in on that. But those are some of the things we want to discuss today. Primarily, though, really these topics. So, Angela, I'll pass it back to you there.
Yeah. So our big questions are the right things on here? Are we missing something that is an urgent management question? Are there thoughts about prioritization or anything to add? And then, of course, number 11 is other. We do want to, if there's something that someone out there is going to turn in, they think, if we've somehow missed it, we're still leaving a little bit of room in the application process for ideas to come in. But we are trying to hone in both with these broad buckets that we think are really important, and then more specific. So did we get it right? That's our question.
And sorry, just to add on to that too, in the past we've said, is this a hot topic? And that's been a high ranking criteria. We're looking at ranking these slightly different and really asking you all to tell us, why you believe this is critical for management of Great Salt Lake. And then the ranking team will take that information and be able to say, this is a critical question. We agree, and they've presented their case well for for the research. Jordy?
Currently ranked these numbers.
No,
These are just the topics, so no proposals have been received. This is just no order.
Yeah, the number is not prioritization. It's just a number. Thank you. That's a good question.
Ben, Heidi.
So I'm going to be the stinker in the corner here. I appreciate these questions. I a lot of focus on salt balance and the hides and the effects of highs and lows and the microbial systems and brine flies and plants. I don't see birds, and I know that there's. I just was wondering if there was consideration to questions regarding management that would help management of the way the places or kind of wood bird that we're working on, but saying it, but for the birds that are at risk, that are experiencing declines in their population on the Great Salt Lake for a huge portion of their life cycle, particularly breeding. And I'll go ahead and say it, it's my clover. I know you funded, a lake-wide count, but it's not getting last year, but it's not getting at environmental, ecological importance and understanding that mix of lower lake levels, exposure of lake bed to people using it. There's a lot of access by people, et cetera.
Yeah,
where does that fit in?
So
is that other?
No, that's great. Right now it would be other. The questions that have been presented or that are on here now were from this body. So we didn't venture too far into creating new questions that weren't presented. So last tech team, we went through and asked people for their general ideas. And then we also, again, formed a sub body to explore other, potential ideas, hopefully trying to capture the different areas of expertise. And that particular question was not one that was, added to this. I think we'd be happy to explore that, but I think that does fit pretty squarely into the the other category where someone could present, a research, project, but again, it would have to be directly tied to something that's, that will affect the way that we're managing. And again, I think those are, there's options there for bird habitat, right? And how those things are affected. And a lot of these things I think trickle into that as well, into the food web, into the fly item. So I think you could almost knock out some of these things in conjunction with also how it may impact birds, but not to write a research.
And no, it's just, I missed a couple notes.
No, it's okay.
because of pneumonia.
Yeah, I understand.
I would have been.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I think that there's still a lot of room to present those. I think you just have to have a very clear, idea of like how the state, our partners, wildlife, others that have management authority or are managing aspects of the lake can use that research to broaden or improve the management that we currently undertake. That's going to be the main criteria. Yeah,
Ben, how long have we been getting by with $125,000?
So that we actually increased that last year from
Okay.
$70,000, I believe. So we upped the amount to 125 just because I think things have, 70,000 was kind of the threshold for a lot of years, and I think what we saw is that we started to get not less meaningful, but less complicated research topics because $70,000 only goes so far. So 125, I think, has provided more room for really, good research. But even at this point, I think, again, that's, we want to hear from you all about what that limitation puts on you and whether, increasing that amount could really give us more bang for our buck on some really, in-depth research. I know that like Bill Johnson's research.
I was gonna say, let me give you an example.
Yeah, that's been
Right.
multi-year, and I think
The two coordinated proposals,
Yep.
UGS, USGS, UU, like multiple
Exactly.
master's students, that's 250 and it seems
Totally.
tight at the end, right?
Yeah, and
So that's the scale, but I mean, we actually advanced something there.
Oh, totally. And I
You
think
know.
that we've had to fund it in multiple years, which is not
Yep.
always ideal.
Yep.
Because I think that what happened is, we do 125 this year, and then it gets funded a little bit from the commissioner's office, and then same thing with like the lithium. We've had to kind of piecemeal that. Like Scott's done some, Andrew's done some that wasn't even a hot topic grant. We just had a really burning desire to get some of those questions answered. Elliot's working on that, so we've kind of piecemealed different topics to get to the point of answering some of these questions. So I guess, again, as part of the discussion, we really want to understand from folks that conduct the research, whether or not there's a need to look at a higher ceiling on that. Because again, we really want meaningful research.
Right, I'm sure that could easily be justified.
I would think so too. But we also want to be fiscally responsible and make sure that we're not raising the ceiling and not getting more in return for that, right? Like we
Right.
really want to make sure it's a good value.
Right.
And so that's part of the balance.
Right. I also think the demonstration of the outcome based on funding various proposals speaks volumes for how these increments of insights through, important investigative measures help improve and inform.
Agreed. And that's another reason we're really focused in on how that research is going to have a measurable outcome in the future, right? Like how it moves the needle for management. So we're really hoping that's the focus of these proposals is how to better help the state and its partners do better at managing the lake. So
Thank you.
I had a question. In the water budget management area is very well done in terms of talking. It doesn't mention anything about sourcing additional water. It's like part of it.
yeah, I think that's again that could fit in the other category. The state has explored import water and other topics conservation quite extensively and has focused really on the conservation side of things. It's not to say that import water couldn't be on the table, but I think that as far as where the focus or priority has been in the past, it's been dealing with the water confines that we have. And we have like a state water agent now that's looking outside of our state's borders and, for opportunities. Edward, I think, might work in that office there. So we've got a lot of different pieces at play. And so this particular grant topic is, we try to keep it's not a lot of money, like $500,000 total for the whole thing. It only goes so far. So we do keep it somewhat focused, but also trying to answer those real burning questions. But we could certainly accommodate a proposal if someone were to, to make that proposal on it. And we felt like it was a good research topic.
And Ben, if I can,
Yeah,
I
please.
think this, if there's, from the commissioner's office, I would encourage people to look for gaps in data that aren't being covered by other, whether it's water agent, water resources in the Basin Integrated Plan, wildlife resources, just look for gaps or if there's connective tissue that's missing between other research that needs to be done. I think that's what I'd like to see in here. And that's what I think this is trying to do. When it comes to the water budget, one of the gaps is just what are those inflows that the lake is already benefiting from? And then if we're adding water to it from conservation that's been dedicated and delivered, or the water agent's successful in importing water from outside the basin, then we know then we can measure it. We know how much is being added. So, but we don't have that baseline inflow data that we really need.
Can I add an enhancing question to that? So as a collective group, are we happy with the technology of monitoring inflows, the volume and the capacity and the rates, or do we, or is a study out there that might be something that turns into a proposal for better technology to monitor at all the different choke points or the flow points that we're looking at from a digital perspective to the future goals?
I think so. If I can, I'll take that. Because I talked with Beth Nielsen from Utah State about this yesterday, and this baseline study is they're looking at how to even characterize those inflows to the main body of the lake. Because you've got the inflows. We turned our back on the lakes for so long, and Corinne, Plain City. Now we're getting, with the help of USGS and others, we're getting better data closer to the lake, but there's a lot of work that needs to go into it. And
maybe in that water budget, or maybe in the other category, what's the technology for the next 3 decades that we need to be able to have better fidelity on water budget management?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
One real weakness in the water budget I see is the direct rainfall to the lake surface. So that's overall estimated 30%, something like that, right?
Right.
What strikes me as almost unbelievable is that you have half as much inflow per square meter on the north arm as on the south arm. And part of that could well be that we have almost no or very few meteorological stations out around the north arm. So that's a big hole and pretty easily solved. I mean, money cost to put stations in to monitor that, but the technology is there. It's not new technology. We just need more stations.
You need someone to also manage that amount of data collection too. And
yeah, it's not free.
Yeah.
What's your process and timeline? You might have said this already to get additions before.
So right now, I think we would like to get this out as soon as possible. I think that this is always a crunch to get these, only meeting 4 times a year. We want to give plenty of time for meaningful proposals. So, I don't know I guess it depends on what you all think. Like if you think this list is comprehensive enough, and if that other bucket is inclusive enough that you all can work with what's on here, or if folks feel like they would like to clarify or add, anything to this, I think we could certainly take some comments, but I would say we probably want to have our RFP out within like a week, Angela. Like, I don't know, do you think that's fair, or maybe 2 weeks if we needed to work through some comments?
I don't know if we're going to go through these one by one, but if not, jump to number 8, microbiome inventory and database. What I'd like to see included as part of that is how all the different microbes are influencing the food web. So who eats the archaea? Are brine shrimp eating that, or brine flies? And then in turn, of course, that goes on to the birds or the brine shrimp industry or whoever, but just figuring out what we have doesn't help us manage very much unless we know how it's affecting other parts of the ecosystem.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think we could certainly add that as a C, or maybe even, look at that as an additional, portion of the microbiome inventory, is that we would like to understand how it helps in the food web. That would be a strong proposal, I think.
I want to acknowledge these online comments as well. So Shaban said a couple of the buckets could be combined. I think that's true, although also proposals can cover more than one bucket. So, you know, that's might be semantic. And then Karen is looking at number 9, needs some clarification on vegetation. Just to, I think, probably say, what are we trying to get after here? That's, and then what was her other? Oh, and then number 6 comment is 6B, the effectiveness of different Phragmites management treatments are pretty well known, but here's a further application that we could go after.
Okay, you can probably just take that. I think I can own up to 9. I actually signed it back at, and I sent that to her. That came out of some conversations with, conversations with Greg Miller over at Water Resources, some conversations with Paul Ingebrand at UGS, as well as with the managers at the Bear River Refuge, all kind of looking to get a better handle on vegetation resources in this particular area and how it's changing over time. And that seems like a modeling effort, and that can easily fit into Phragmites because that's what a lot of people Rob is concerned about. But Greg, you might have a better sense for your base model. How do you need to understand vegetation?
It's all about how all of that affects water. So we probably measure the outflows, measure the inflows. The less we know how all that's educating and what the water budget is, you know, it's hard to model it in the future. So that's what we were worried about.
Yeah. One other thing I just wanted to mention as well that I think is really important is that when there's, you know, like if we're taking groundwater samples and there's like an opportunity to do like a chemical analysis or you know, characterize the groundwater, and we're only focused on like, you know, groundwater contributions to the lake, those are things that I think would also be really helpful for our proposals moving forward. Like we have data gaps all over the place, and I think that the more of these buckets we can touch on, you know, the better a proposal would be. And I think those are things to perhaps consider as you're, you know, writing a proposal is where it may have touch points in these other buckets. And then also I would just encourage anybody that's considering to you know, to draft a proposal and wondering, you know, how a lake manager might use your proposal, to actually reach out to the you know, the entity that you think is involved in that, and they'll probably have a lot of really good ideas about the information that they're missing. You know, Craig, I know you probably would have a lot of thoughts on, you know, the modeling and other things that inputs that would be helpful to dial that in. So I think that that's, you know, more or less what we're looking for in this is like really being able to provide a clear benefit to the, you know, the lake managers to make those decisions. Yeah, please.
I'd like to say one thing. Also, an opportunity that I think exists now more than ever is opportunity to add additional monitoring pieces to existing monitoring platforms or, you know, technical devices out in the lake. But if you know of a division or an agency that has a platform, like we're just putting a bunch out in the wetlands, then you know, see if you can hop on that bandwagon and add your air quality monitoring devices to that. And so it's kind of a big network of monitoring equipment, and it's all covered throughout the lake bed and then the basin.
Does anybody else have any questions about what's on here? I mean, we can talk specifically about any of these buckets if you all have any questions about the intent. Like I said, Angela and I didn't sit around and make these up together. We collected information from this body and then also from the sub body of folks that had provided that input. So there's probably people in the room that can better answer the questions, but if there's something that's you think is missing or that we need to dive into a little bit, we're happy to have that discussion now. I think then perhaps it would be safe to say if you all have something that you want to refine or something that you really think needs to be included in here that isn't appropriate to fit into the other category, that you email Angela and she can work with you to get it in there. But I think our intent would to have comments concluded hopefully by the end of this week. So if you have anything that you think needs to be in there, clarification, we get those by the end of the week, and then we'll try to work as quickly as possible to get the RFP out to make sure that these folks have ample time to get this in place before the fiscal year begins. So maybe just one other discussion piece. Does anybody have any hard feelings about the cap of $125,000? Anybody feel like that's extremely limiting? Also, if we were to consider, you know, a 2-year grant program to allow for those longer proposals, does anybody find a lot of benefit to that, or do you think we should just stick to what we've done in the past with the 1 year, $125,000?
The 2-year would be extremely beneficial for university people that want to put master's projects together. You can always, well, I think I'll get another year of this and I'll be able to fund you for another year, but that's kind of risky. So really helpful in that aspect of having a stable source for at least 2 years for graduate students.
Studies because you can start the field season at the start of the growing season.
July 1st doesn't like really. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's been the challenge that I've observed as well, is like starting in July 1st and ending in June, split seasons and even hydrologic calendars. I mean, I think there's a whole lot of reasons that the fiscal year doesn't work very well. So that's where I've been thinking we should move things, but if
Plus, it's a mad dash to finish a report.
Totally. Yeah, I agree.
In a long-term strategy for our group, it's possible to talk to the legislature and say, look, it doesn't work studying Phragmites starting in July, or most of the stuff we're doing ecological stuff, of being able to carry over funds from 1 year to the next so that we can get on a more logical time scale.
I think that if we were to look at a 2-year time frame, the funding that we have lapses every July, and they don't like to allow us to carry over lapsing funding. It's kind of like a no-no in state funding sources. But what we'd be looking at is, you know, what can we accomplish in these years? And if you have like a smaller portion of the upfront funding, and then year 2 was your heavy year, we would probably just look at funding it that way. So in the proposal, we would be asking for a schedule of how you would intend to work the funding, and then we would allocate and appropriate the funding, or not appropriate, but allocate the funding and award it accordingly to like what's put into a proposal. So I don't think you'd have to carry anything over. You'd just be able to make
that would help. That would give like a year and a half of field day, meaningful field day, which is a lot better than half a year.
Yeah, we still need to kind of cook the RFP to make sure that we're fully covering what that entails, and then also making sure that this isn't just a way to prolong research. Like, I think that everybody wants answers as soon as possible. So we want to find that balance again, is like, when is it necessary to have a 2-year study versus something that we could accomplish in that, that single year time frame. So Angela and I will work together to try to come up with something good. Yeah, please.
I need a buzzer. I just want to echo the points that have been made for ecological reasons, for budgeting reasons, and for developing pretty intensive study that is locked into 1 year. It would sure be logistically time saving, give us more time out on the field if we could do it by, like a 2-year project. And from an NGO perspective, the only thing we haven't been able to do is to support graduate study work, and for our program, we definitely have an intention to bring in a graduate student or two for part of our work, so it would be really helpful. Yeah.
No, I think that was, our inclination is that there's a little bit of a gap there on the 1 year time frame. So I think that sounds like something we definitely need to investigate, and we'll do that. But yeah, go ahead, Jake.
What do you think about, like, if we're talking like a 2-year time frame for these proposals and for this research, will there be an overlap, or will it be, hey, we're not going to fund anything else for 2 years until the conclusion of this project?
I think what we'd be looking at is we'd be hopefully not allocating the second year fully. I think we'd only be looking at projects that need the 2-year funding. And again, these are things that we'd have to develop, is how much of year 2 are we going to allocate now versus how much could be available for the full 2 years, how much is going to be available just in this 1 year. So there's some logistical things that I think we still haven't totally worked out, but I think this is something where, our team can look at other grants that we administer, or other grants we've been involved in, and try to find a good solution for that.
Right. I was thinking in consideration of the opportunity cost, right?
Yeah.
having one thing, small targeted versus something that's a little better and supports the student, which is also very, very good to consider.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would probably want to be, have some flexibility to answer any burning questions next year that arise over the time. So maybe what we'd be looking at is only committing, half of the funding to 2-year grants and then looking towards kind of having a leapfrog type system moving forward so we can, keep the ball or the pendulum swinging, I should say. But anyway, we'll continue to investigate that and try to come up with something to capture the conversation today. Yeah.
Not a place, but if the criteria is for deliverable water, may have to propose one idea. I'm Robert Creer, Water from the West, waterfront. Volunteer for at least the last year looking at technology issues. But if a project is actionable, it will deliver water quickly. I have looked at articles of water by rail. And in studying that, a 100 tanker train, 1 unit train, 20,000 gallons per car would deliver 6.1377 acre feet in one trip. Our group was seeking for 1 million acre feet remedy. That would be 447 trains per day year round to deliver 1 million acre feet. The cost of a train is high, but for a smaller project that we can verify and establish routes and connections and authority, one acre feet, one unit train at 6.13777 acre feet per train should be maybe considered as an immediate actionable augmentation.
And I think there's a lot, of details that would be needed to really analyze something like that, such as like the source of the water. If we're talking, seawater, I think that some of the questions we would be having is, how that impacts the lake itself, right? By adding those.
Having attended recently the Utah State Utah Tribal Indian celebration at the Capitol. And still I'm speaking right, not with any authority, just a brash idea. If tribal reservations, tribal entities, tribal authorities transferred rights to a small reservation in South Dakota on the Missouri River, just above a dam, that water could be to their advantage and to deliverable at Great Salt Lake.
I think that's a really interesting concept, and I think that there's probably some avenues that we should take that maybe would be a little bit more appropriate outside of the research program. I think what you're asking is largely a political question and a will, right? Like if the right water deals could be made, and if the logistics of having 47, or did you say 4,700 trains, or how many trains per day?
447.
447. Okay. Even 447 trains, if logistically Union Pacific could handle that and what that would look like. I think a lot of those are more logistical and political questions. And I do think there are some avenues to investigate that, again, with the State Water Agent's office, even some conversations with the Commissioner's office on some of those strategies. But these hot topic grants have really been focused in on unanswered scientific questions or even data gaps. So we should talk offline and see how we can connect you to the right folks.
Thank you. I'm dazzled by the lithium discussion.
Yeah, it's interesting, right?
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you. Any other comments right now? Questions?
I want to add one thing. Unfortunately, I came from the government side for many years and contracted and everything else. But if you support the structure where you get that aid, you have the main proposal, right? You support a structure that has options that specify for the second year. That will actually help you better define your budget with the legislature and internally, looking at a couple of years in advance. When you go to 2 years,
yeah,
make sure there's some closes that option enough so that you can use it to champion for more money if you need it, or specifically you get to that next year. Whether you're going to award the option.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that advice. That's definitely something we'll have to put into play and take into consideration.
Thank you all. Any other comments or revisions, you can email me and we'll figure out how to wrangle things in. Thank you for that input. I'd like to open it up for public comment. This is a public meeting, and so if anyone has a comment, it can either be about something on the agenda that we've already discussed or sort of a broader topic. Anyone online as well.
Yeah, I would just like to say that the Great Salt Lake Tech Team is truly a gift. And I personally appreciate coming to these meetings, listening to the conversations and the research that is being done on behalf of the Great Salt Lake ecosystem. And that sense of commitment of the integration of, improved management, insightful management, as it pertains to the work that the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan is working on and the Great Salt Lake Commissioner. So I'm just really honored to be in your company, and I just want to thank you for your commitment. Thank you.
Well, that was a very nice public comment. Thank you.
For the record.
I want to add that our commenter, Linda Freitas, was recently elected to the board of the International Society for Salt Lake Research. Congratulations to Linda.
That's great.
That sort of rolls us into our next part, which is just any updates or other business, member updates, issues, anything else that needs to be brought forward at this time.
Give an update on fragmite treatments. So we are underway with all of our mowing and trampling for the season. We, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, are doing about 9,000 acres of mowing and trampling fragmites. We have several prescribed fires planned in Bear Bay and Wilkesburg and outside of Ogden Bay. So if we get the right conditions, we'll be doing several prescribed fires. Division of Wildlife is doing about 1,000 acres of mowing and trampling in the Willard Spur. So there's a lot going on. It's probably 3 times more than has ever been done. And then one particular project I wanted to point out is the North Davis Sewer District outfall that people will recall. North Davis moved their outfall to the other side of the causeway, and the deal that we worked out with North Davis, as well as water quality, is they will continue to flow water into Farmington Bay for 2 years to facilitate Phragmites treatments prior to the move of the water being permanent. We did the first year, and so we have a full treatment of Phragmites on that North Davis Sewer District block, which was just mowed. And it's about 1,300 acres. There's got a few, maybe like 50 acres left. So that'll be finished this week. And then this spring, the water will be turned back on into Farmington Bay to facilitate another year of Phragmites treatments. There is a large patch on the far west end that didn't get treated yet that you'll still see from the causeway, but a lot of it you see is mowed down. Majority of it.
Anyone else?
Yes. May 6th, 7th, and 8th of 2026 is the next Great Salt Lake Issues Forum. So you can put that on your calendars, and I'll be in touch.
Great.
I'd like to provide an update that I promise we will never be in this room again. Apologize that we all had to cram in here. This was a little bit of an oversight in booking at DNR. So we'll make sure that we have more space for our next meeting.
Great. So our next meeting right now is scheduled for May 13th at 9 a.m. at a place to be determined. So keep your eye out for that information. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Invited you and.
Red points.